Welcome, everyone, to the Classy Career Girl podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to Kate White. She is the New York Times best-selling author of 12 murder mysteries and thrillers and several popular career books, including the Get Gutsy Girl Handbook, the Gutsy Girl Handbook, Your Manifesto for Success, based on her groundbreaking bestseller, Why Good Girls Don't Get Ahead, But Gutsy Girls Do. And for 14 years, Kate was the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine, where she increased overall circulation by 30% and made Cosmo the #1 magazine in the US in single copy sales. So our audience loves hearing from you. Your last interview on our podcast, I think it was back in 2014, was one of our most downloaded episodes.
Oh.
So I am thrilled to have you back. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. It's always nice to get a little boost because sometimes you feel you did okay with a talk or a speech or an event, but you can never be 100% sure until you see how many people actually clicked on it or downloaded it.
Yeah, I think it's the topic of gutsy. I think there's something about that word that our listeners just really caught on to. And I know I've been in the career world for a little while, so I know how many books that you've written about this. And so I'm curious, what is different about today's modern workplace that made you want to write another book about this same topic this year?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And interestingly, I suggested it to my publisher I suggested it first to my agent, and almost before she could write to the publisher wrote basically in the same 24-hour period saying, hey, what if we, did this? So that was interesting. And I think right now, even before the Me Too movement, you had a sense of women really understanding that their voices could be powerful, particularly when there are a lot of voices at the same time. And it just seemed to be a very gutsy moment. Now, the interesting thing when I did that book 23 years ago, the last paragraph was, I am sure, though my publisher hates me saying this book will be obsolete when my daughter's in her 20s. Well, my daughter's in her late 20s. Wow. And I realized that unfortunately the book isn't obsolete because I think women still wrestle with the kind of hesitation, the fear of speaking up, the fear of asking that a good girl has. Though we don't always today think of it as good girl stuff. We think, you know what, this isn't a good time. I'm not going to bug them right now for that. Or I don't want to rock the boat unnecessarily, or I'm going to wait for the right moment to put myself out there. And so it's good girl behavior, but it comes disguised as something else. And so we often don't see it for what it is. And so I find that I just find that women today are gutsier, and yet there are certain situations where they hold back, and it can affect your career. Just one interesting stat, that if you negotiated a starting salary up from $50,000 to $55,000, it's going to have a huge impact on your whole financial well-being for the rest of your life. And sometimes we don't do that negotiation because we think, well, it's just $5,000. But if you got normal raises over the course of your lifetime, that extra $5,000 would equal almost $700,000. Mm-hmm. So little things can make a difference.
And I love it said that there's new examples and never before told stories in this book. So I wanted to dive into because I didn't ask you this question last time, your career as an editor-in-chief of Cosmo. How were you gutsy? What are some examples of ways that you were gutsy, or you wish you were gutsier?
Yeah, well, first of all, when I wrote the book, I hadn't become editor of Cosmo yet. I wasn't even editor of Redbook yet. But I think taking a gutsier tack definitely helped me. Though I will be honest, when I got offered the Cosmo job, I didn't apply for it. It was a Sunday. I was out in Pennsylvania with my husband and kids, and my boss called me up, and I felt my knees going weak because my boss didn't call on Sundays, and she wanted me to come into the office, even though I was 3 states away. And I said to my husband, boy, I'm not the editor of Red Book anymore, but I don't know what I am. And so I was shocked when she said, we want you to become the editor of Cosmo. Yeah, Cosmo, a lot of people don't realize this. At least then, it's not anymore, but the whole time I was there, I had it at #1 in single copy sales. And it was a huge brand. I said, yes, of course. I wasn't going to say no at that moment. But later I said to my husband, I just don't feel ready for this. It's a stretch. I think I should consider calling her and saying I've had more time to think about it. And I didn't, because I didn't want to jeopardize my existing job, because she might say, you're such a loser for turning this down. I don't want you here either at Red Book. But I was a great fit for that job. And I think that it made me realize that sometimes we talk ourselves out of how ready we are. We think we have to be 100% ready as women. And my motto was always start before you're ready. Just, say yes and then figure it out. And of course, in my years at Cosmo, that magazine was such an over-the-top brand that I ended up having to be gutsier than ever before. The content of the magazine was gutsy. So it kind of taught me to think every day, hey, what am I going to do to break the rules today? Because great ideas come from breaking the rules and not being afraid to do that.
Wow. Yeah. So breaking the rules and saying yes and just figuring it out, just like diving in, because they were giving you the offer. So obviously you had the qualifications, but it's that imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to someone the other day about imposter syndrome and how, in a way, it's a little bit like, did you ever hear of that movie, When a Stranger Calls? It's an old movie, but it's based on sort of a classic urban legend. A girl is babysitting. She gets these calls, these creepy, scary calls that become creepier and creepier. And the parents are at some restaurant, and this is in the days before they had cell phones. And so she calls the police, and they tell her, we will trace the call. So the next time he calls, just keep him on the line a bit longer. And she does that. And then the police call back and they go, get out. He's calling from inside the house. Oh. And so in a way, my friend and I were saying how you're not the imposter. The imposter is calling from the spare bedroom in your brain. It's that little voice that is telling you something that isn't true. And studies show that men too suffer from imposter syndrome. And I think it's just important to know that you're never going to be fully ready for some big new gig, some wonderful promotion. You say yes, then you get in there, you do the homework, you figure it out. And more often than not, they knew better than you do that you would be a great fit for that job. Because sometimes people see us objectively in a way we can't see ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a lot of listeners who are going through career transition right now. So they're feeling kind of stuck. What would you say to a woman who doesn't feel ready for that next level in her career and is feeling kind of stuck?
Well, the one area I would say that it's good to maybe listen to the I'm not ready voice is if you don't know what transition you want to make. Do you want to go here, A or B or C? And what you do there is you just explore. You do your homework. You get a sense of what lights you up. Sometimes it's good to, I was just counseling someone last night, and I had this idea actually, that you start to think about an area you might want to go into, or a couple of areas, and you customize your resume so you've got 2 or 3 resumes with these different areas, and you don't lie, but you take out stuff that doesn't work with one area that might work with the other. And sometimes maybe looking at those couple of 2 or 3 resumes, you can look at one and go, hey, I love the way this one looks. And maybe that's an area that you really should give more consideration into going to, because now that you've weeded out other stuff and you're just left with what you've been doing roughly in that general area, it feels good to you. One other tip I would say is to just get out there in the world, have lunch with people that are doing things that might pique your interest or might not. Just expose yourself to as much as possible. Because what I found years ago when I was doing a book of many successful women, I only realized this after I was finished, that most of them had figured out what they wanted to do and what they were passionate about by bumping into it someplace. We've sort of been trained to think you get out the yellow legal pad and you write, you put a couple lines down the middle, like, A is this and B is this. Or you get out that book, What Color is Your Parachute? And I'm not knocking it, but most of these women figured it out because they were out someplace and they went, you know what? I like what she's saying, or I like what they're doing here. And you can let that be a guide.
I love that. Like looking at what other careers other people have that you kind of admire.
Yes. And there's been so much said lately about, you've got to be passionate about your career. And maybe we all can't be. But one of the things I discovered about Cosmo, it was the first magazine in a while that I had been at that I just really loved it. I ended up for a while in magazines that were more women's service magazines, and they were kind of buttoned up and not my cup of tea so much, but I didn't know it. And I started to think, maybe I really need to be out of magazines. But Cosmo was such a good fit for me. And I do think if you can tell yourself, I'm going to try to find something that's a good fit where I go into work and feel challenged and excited, it makes a huge difference. And maybe it doesn't always work out, but I got to have that experience. And I just love going to work every day for 14 years at that magazine.
Yeah. I love that. That's what we dream of, and that's what we want. So it's so nice to hear that coming from you.
One thing I did do, because I have to say, I didn't figure out I needed to be at a place like Cosmo. Somebody figured it out for me. But in a sense, I raised my hand. I put myself out there. When I was at Redbook, we were doing a big management conference, and my boss put different executives, and which included editors-in-chief and publishers, on committees. And we had to do certain presentations at the management conference. And I was with a group, and of course, I remember one person was the editor of Harper's Bazaar, and everybody was so busy. And no one wanted to come up with the type of idea that we were taxed with trying to do, and that was come up with an idea for another magazine that the company should do. So I said, you know what? I have an idea. I ran it by everybody, and everybody said, yeah, I like that. And then I said, no one wanted to put the presentation together, but I put the presentation together because it was a way for me to be out there. And it ended up, I think, having a big effect on me. My boss was pretty new, and when I finished, she gave me this big room of executives. And so not only did it get me thinking about, hey, what do I want to do? I putting myself out there, but it had her see me in a different way. So get out of your chair, explore, volunteer, and try something else where you just test some different skills, and maybe you discover, wow, I run this little area for this group I volunteer for, and I like what that feels like.
And I think the last time, I don't think we talked about side hustles and plan Bs, and I know that's something that's in this book now. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts too, because that kind of leads right into that. Volunteering, interning,
right,
taking on a side hustle can lead to so much. What are your thoughts on that now?
Anna, let me ask you, do you find a lot of women, as I would suspect, but in your age group, are really interested in the side hustle
Yes.
idea now? Yes,
Yes.
right. Okay. I think side hustles can be really great. They can be one of two things. They can be a way for you to begin to explore a passion project that you hope might make you a lot of money. And today, in fact, I was talking to my orthodontist, and I have to go in for a yearly checkup. And she was saying her sister in her 20s, well, she was still in college, launched a very successful jewelry business.
Mm.
And so that's the kind of side hustle some of us dream of, because maybe we'll sell it one day. Yay. A side hustle can also be a little bit of ass covering. And I had two side hustles when I was at Cosmo. One was public speaking, and one was writing murder mysteries. And mostly I wanted them because I thought it's very easy to get fired in this business, and I want protection when that happens. Now, I never ended up getting fired, but I began to see these are the things I'm going to do at a certain age where I don't want to be working for the man anymore. I want to have the freedom. We live in Uruguay in the wintertime, and so that's what I wanted. So you can think of a side hustle for either purpose. And the one thing I would say is there's something to be said for working for a great corporation, getting vested, having a pension plan, and really building up money, a nest egg that allows you down the road to do what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And you could end up, if you're trying to start a side hustle and turn it into some big business, it's not going to work. And then all of a sudden at 34, you're like, okay, I've got to start close to the bottom in some company. So my first advice is don't romanticize the idea, because there really is a value to working for the man. I worked for the man, and it was fabulous for many, many years. Then try, as you just mentioned, Anna, the idea of volunteering, testing the waters, see what you like. What thing do you secretly love doing? I met a great makeup artist one day at a television station, and she said part of how she knew she wanted to do this was because she loved doing her kids' Halloween makeup. So is there something you love to do that you could turn into another career, one that you enjoy more? Don't cheat, because bosses are starting to get kind of sick of the idea of that may seem more important than your day job. Now, there's some places that they want to keep millennials happy, so they encourage you to, hey, do that if you want. But other places don't want you too preoccupied. And by all means, even if you're not going to do it as a major play one day, I think it's really good to have a plan B in your back pocket, because things change so much. And for me, having that plan B really paid off.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that we're talking about this, because when I interviewed you last time in 2014, I had a day job still, but I was doing this interviewing just to learn, to kind of figure out myself a little more, to learn from people like you. And now this is my full-time thing, and my husband and I work together. But it's kind of fun to hear you talk about side hustles because of that change.
Yeah. And so that's exactly right. In a way, it started for you on it as a volunteer thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, look, I can amortize, go for it. And you're doing something too, that even if you decided to seg back into something else one day, you've got a lot of skills you're developing.
Yeah, I would put this on my resume too. When I was applying for other corporate jobs, I would put my blog as on my resume too. So there's a way to add to your resume.
And did you find that people responded well to it when they saw it on there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so anyways, I'm a huge, that's why I wanted to ask you, because obviously with my story, I'm definitely a fan of side hustling, and a lot of people ask, how I did it. And so hearing, you had the two side hustles too, while you were even working at Cosmo.
Yeah,
I'm sure
though
you were very busy. How did you
well,
find time to do those?
yeah, that's when I was at Cosmo, I used to do public speaking, and see, the public speaking wasn't cheating, because that I went places as the editor of Cosmo. I might talk career strategies, but still I was representing my brand. And the mysteries would have been considered cheating, but I didn't do book tours. I was very careful. But the number one question people would ask me always, the first hand up would be, after the speech was done, how do you do both? And it wasn't that they wanted to write mysteries too. It was they wondered, what the hell are you doing that you can run this huge brand, but you're still putting out a murder mystery every year? And you have two children that aren't psychopaths. At least they haven't appeared to be yet. And what I did was I'd read a lot of time management books in my 20s, because I had a little bit of a procrastination issue. I was working at Glamour, and I was pulling all nighter practically to do pieces like how to get rid of a pimple by Saturday night. I just would save stuff to the last minute. And this time management guy taught me a great strategy. He said that when we have a project that we want to do, and maybe it's a side project, something important, or even a big project at work that you don't have the time built in for it, part of why we put it off is not because we don't really want to do it, but because it's too daunting. And his advice was slice it down, slice the salami, just the way when you slice the salami, it doesn't look like that big, ugly hunk of meat anymore. And I found that really effective for me. So what I would do is schedule the time to do my side hustle. And you have to do that. You have to block it off. And I would schedule it Saturday mornings. I would get up really early, and Sunday mornings before the kids got up. And I would be at my computer religiously. But in the beginning, slicing the salami, I only wrote for about 15 minutes a day, because that was all I could handle. And then over time, I got better and better at moving that time frame.
Mm. Yeah, and the 15 minutes adds up if you do that every day. And I think that's
Right.
what a
And
lot of people don't realize.
yeah, and eventually when I got up to 2 hours, and by then the kids were up, Mommy, do we have any breakfast today? I would aim for 4 pages on Saturday, 4 pages on Sunday. And then I got to work ahead of my staff by an hour. I dropped the kids off at school, go to work. Fortunately, those Cosmo employees love to get in late, 9:30, quarter 10. But I would use part of my early time there to write one more page. So a page every day during the week, 4 pages Saturday, 4 pages Sunday. And before long, you've got a book.
Yeah, what an accomplishment too while you're doing all that. So you talk about, and you've had such a career, and one of the things you talk about why it's essential to manage your career, not just your job. And I think this is a perfect tie-in, because your career involves all these different things that you're doing. You're writing your murder mysteries, you're at Cosmo, you're speaking, you're writing career books. Like, how would you recommend that we think in the future for managing our career? Because we can do so many things.
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up, because even though I've been interviewed a lot for the book, very few people have brought that part up, but I think it's so essential. We are so busy managing our jobs that we don't manage our success. And the next thing you know, um, time escapes, and all of a sudden 6 months have passed, and then a year. There's a great expression I once heard from a management guru when I was running Working Woman magazine, which was a fabulous business magazine for women back in the 80s. He said, and it's derived from an old Southern expression. He said, sometimes we get so busy slaying the alligators, we're up to our ass in gnats and alligators, that we forget that our main goal was to drain the swamp. And his point was, the slaying of the alligators is the day-to-day stuff we do at work. And the big picture stuff is the draining of the swamp. That helped me so much at Cosmo. I booked time every single week to do nothing but close my door and think about, okay, where are we going next week with Cosmo? Where are we going next year? But eventually I saw how good it is to do this with our careers too. Book 30 minutes every week to maybe watch a TEDx talk. Maybe you send some links to your mentor, so you're not always going to your mentor with an ask, but once in a while you're giving back. It could just be, hey, you mentioned that you love Paris. Here's a great piece I just saw on Paris. And then also during that time, you start to probe and ask yourself some questions. Am I happy right now? Am I feeling challenged? Am I so happy and loving this job it means I'm too much in a comfort zone and I'm ready to leave and I don't know that? Am I doing what I want to be doing? Is there some childhood dream? And that was what happened for me, asking myself that question. Is there some girlhood dream that I'd love to tackle before it's too late? And mine was, yeah, I want to write a freaking murder mystery. I have no idea why, but I'm going to run out of time to do it. And so that's what I think really is a great way to spend 30 minutes a week. Step back, ask yourself, how am I doing? And then what are some stepping stones, that would take you to the next threshold of success as you define it, including how your success interacts with your professional life too. Is it eating up or your personal life? I'm sorry, Anna. Is it eating up too much of your personal life? Mm-hmm. And how can you fix that?
That's so important. So where can people learn more about you and this book that just came out as well?
Well, if they go on my website, katewhitespeaks.com, which is different than the mystery website. I'm a bifurcated brand that's so bizarrely different. And in fact, I talk a lot in the book about the Gutsy Girl Handbook about determining your brand and, follow my advice in the book. Don't follow what I've done. Murder mystery writer, career expert, unrelated as far as I can see. So if you go to katewhitespeaks.com, you can read about the Gutsy Girl Handbook. You can book me to speak if you want. You can see, I just put up a link to the Today Show segment I did 2 weeks ago. They did a nice segment on the book. And I also do some blogging too with career strategies. So you can find all that stuff there.
Awesome. And the book's on Amazon, right?
It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's hardcover in those bookstores too, independent bookstores, and you can find it all those places.
Awesome. So I always ask at the very end, what is one action our listeners can take? You've shared a lot of different great pieces of advice today, but if there was one thing that you want to leave them with or one action that they can take today, what would that be?
I would say tonight when they get home or whenever they have a chance, think about a gutsy move you've been talking yourself out of. Asking for a promotion, coming up with a job that your department doesn't even have, but it could use, and you could do that job. Asking your boss if you could represent the company at an industry event. Asking your mentor for something, an email introduction. Come up with one thing that you've made an excuse not to do and vowed to do it tomorrow. And not only do I guarantee it'll pay off for you, but you'll love the kick-ass way you feel once you do it.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining us today. I know our listeners are going to love it.
Anna, thank you so much. It was great to reconnect with you again.
Definitely. And then your next book is coming out. No, I'll interview you when you come out with your next career book then.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Anna.
Bye.